I woke up with the metallic taste of blood in my mouth and the snow clinging to my skin like a second wound. Everything in me ached, my bones, the memory, the silence. There was an emptiness around me that felt vaster than the world, and within it, only the distant sound of a howl. I don't know if it was a wolf or a man, but it called to me as if pronouncing my name for the first time. Before we dive into this story, leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 10 and tell us what city you're joining us from. May this moment bring reflection and emotion to your heart. I was raised for silence. From a young age, I learned that some voices were born to be hushed. A bastard daughter of a forgotten woman, I grew up in the back rooms of the manor house where nobles smiled under chandeliers and I served wine with trembling hands. No one's gaze lingered on me, except for the cruel ones. Those that measured the dirt on my skin, the awkwardness of my posture. They said my presence was a mistake, a living reminder of an ancient dishonor. I believed them, until the night the king arrived. He came in the midst of a storm, a man whose presence seemed to bend the air. Voices fell silent as he crossed the great hall. His eyes, deep grey like wet iron, met mine for an instant, and I swear I felt the world shift. Everyone bowed except for me, who trembled too much to react. I remember the sound of his boots on the marble, the breath that lengthened before each word. They called him the Alpha, the King of the North, the man who ruled with iron fists and a heart of stone. But that night, when his eyes pierced through me, I perceived a different shadow. Something between curiosity and pain. The women whispered that he never smiled, that his chest carried a secret sorrow. Men feared him, servants revered him, and I simply avoided him. Still, it was to him they threw me when they needed a scapegoat. A missing necklace, a well-told lie, and suddenly I was on my knees before the makeshift throne, hearing the accusations echo through the hall. My stepmother, with a tense smile and perfectly still hands, delivered the final blow. She always sought attention, Your Majesty. She's just like her mother, incapable of knowing her place. The silence that followed was an abyss. He looked at me for a long moment before uttering a single phrase. Take her out. That was all. No defense, no explanation. Just the cold, the snow, and the sound of the gate closing behind me. That's how I began to walk, wounded, blind, unaware that I would still be called. My childhood was merely a rehearsal for silence. In the manor house kitchens and corridors, I learned to become invisible, a ghost of flesh and bone moving through shadows. My hands rough, my face always downcast, my eyes never confronting. An ideal servant, an obedient bastard. My mother had been the secret lover of the lord of the house, discarded when her belly began to swell. I never knew her face beyond the faded portrait I kept under my straw mattress. Her eyes, which they said were just like mine, shone with a melancholy that seemed to foreshadow her fate. She died during childbirth, alone, as thunder rattled the windows. Lady Eleonora, the legitimate wife and my stepmother by cruel fate, allowed me to live only to demonstrate her infinite Christian mercy. See how kind I am, she would tell visitors. I raised the bastard as if she were one of the maids. And so I grew up, amidst dry orders and endless tasks, learning that a servant's greatest value was knowing how to disappear. The other maids kept their distance, as if my bastardy were contagious. Only Martha, an old cook with cloudy eyes, occasionally slipped an extra piece of bread into my hands. You have her eyes, she would murmur, before returning to the steaming pots. It was the closest thing to affection I had ever known. At 16, I was promoted from kitchen maid to hall servant. A rare privilege, they told me, though I quickly understood it was just a new stage for humiliations. Lady Eleonora wanted to display me as proof of her magnanimity and, simultaneously, as a constant reminder of her husband's sin. I was her shadow during dinners, the pale, trembling silhouette who served wine without spilling a drop, who awaited commands without uttering a sigh. It was on one of those nights that Isolde, Lady Eleonora's legitimate daughter, truly began to hate me. She, with her golden hair and shrill laughter, noticed her suitor's gaze, a young baron from distant lands, following my movements. It wasn't desire I saw in those eyes, but curiosity, perhaps even compassion. For Isolde, however, any attention diverted from her was an unforgivable betrayal. The punishment came the next morning. A torn dress, accusations of theft, a beating with a willow switch that left my back raw. "So you'll learn not to seduce men destined for your betters," she hissed, as I bit my lips to keep from screaming. The seasons succeeded each other like pages of a book no one read. Scorching summers, melancholic autumns, cruel winters. In every face around me, the same indifference. In every order, the same certainty that I would never be more than a stain to be tolerated. Occasionally, a traveller or merchant would let slip a surprised glance upon seeing me, as if my presence in that house was an unsolved equation. In those rare moments, I allowed myself to imagine that there was something in me, some trait or characteristic, that did not belong there. A seed from another world planted in the infertile soil of the manor house. At night, as the candles melted and the wind whistled through the window cracks, I took refuge in stolen books from the library. I read in secret, under the faint glow of a candle, devouring stories of distant lands, of women who defied fates, of talking wolves and kings who succumbed. Words were my only true nourishment, the only proof that a world existed beyond the walls of that estate. That's how I survived year after year, feeding on borrowed dreams and postponing the moment of confronting the truth. That for people like me, there was no escape. And then, on that winter night, when the snow fell like feathers plucked from the sky, the gate bell rang. The King of the North had arrived. Servants scurried frantically through the corridors. Lady Eleonora demanded perfection, her orders echoing like whips. Isolde locked herself in her chambers to adorn herself with her finest jewels and gowns. The lord of the house, my biological father, who had never spoken a single word to me, was pale as death. The king's visit was unexpected. In times of tense peace, his presence signified something grave or urgent. I was smoothing the linen tablecloths on the large oak table when the murmuring began. He had entered. Not through the main gates, as would be protocol, but through the side entrance, escorted only by 2 guards silent as statues. The wind accompanied him like a faithful hound, making the candle flames dance frantically. I should have retreated immediately to the kitchens. Maids were not supposed to be present when nobility gathered, but something kept me there, paralyzed among the shadows of a column. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath, and then I saw him. Tall, imposing, emanating an authority that seemed older than the kingdom itself. His black beard framed an austere face marked by subtle scars. His eyes, however, were what impressed most, a grey so deep it seemed to absorb the light around them. "Your Majesty," my father murmured, bowing deeply. "What an unexpected honour." "The honour would be greater if your house were prepared to receive me." "Lord Henry," the king replied, his voice grave as distant thunder. "But I understand my arrival was sudden. It was at that moment that it happened. A simple gesture, a trivial accident. My trembling hand knocked over a crystal goblet which shattered on the stone floor with a crash that seemed to shake the very foundations of the mansion. All eyes converged on me, Lady Eleonora's horrified gaze, Isolde's satisfied smile, my father's empty expression. And then, the king's eyes. Our pupils met for an instant that stretched into an eternity. Something in that look pierced me like a blade. There was no contempt there, no anger, nor the usual indifference. There was recognition, as if, in some inexplicable way, he already knew me. "I beg your pardon, Your Majesty." Lady Eleonora rushed, signalling for 2 servants to remove me. "She's merely a careless servant. She will be punished accordingly." The king raised a gloved hand, a simple gesture that immediately silenced the hall. "Leave her," he commanded without averting his eyes from mine. "I did not come here to witness punishments for broken goblets." I retreated into the shadows, my heart hammering against my ribs, while the nobles resumed their tense conversations. Throughout the night, as I served the main table, I felt the weight of that gaze upon me. Not constant, but intermittent, as if between matters of war and politics, the king found time to decipher the enigma of a simple maid. And in each of those moments, my entire body seemed to respond to a call I did not understand. The banquet stretched for hours. We learned that the king would remain for a few days, as a snowstorm had blocked the northern roads. The news fell like a sentence upon the manor house. Isolde saw an opportunity to win a royal suitor. Lady Eleonora feared family secrets would be exposed. My father drank goblet after goblet of wine as if trying to drown some invisible dread. I, however, felt only the weight of that presence, the inexplicable certainty that this visit would change everything. And when the guests finally retired and I was assigned to prepare the royal chambers, I found an object on the dresser that made my blood run cold. A small miniature portrait, framed in silver. The same portrait I kept under my straw mattress. My mother's face. The hours dissolved into wind. The howl returned closer, more insistent. Something in me recognized that sound as if destiny itself had gained a voice. The ice burned my skin, and yet each step brought me closer to something I did not comprehend. It was then that I felt it. I didn't see him, not yet, but the air changed. The snow ceased for an instant, and a presence made itself known around me. The sound of a horse, the weight of breath. The voice that cut through the wind. Stop! Don't take another step. The timbre was the same I had heard in the hall, only now there was urgency, a contained fear. He dismounted, and even without seeing him, I felt him kneel before me. His hands, large, rough, firm, touched my face with a care that did not match the legend surrounding him. "You shouldn't be alive," he murmured. "Neither should you," I replied without thinking. The silence that followed was heavier than the sky. On the third night of his stay, the snow finally let up. The night sky bloomed with cold, distant stars, and the full moon bathed the fields in an ethereal blue light. The house slept, save for the night guards and me, assigned to keep the fireplace in the royal chambers lit throughout the early morning. A task that placed me dangerously close to the man who had turned my world upside down with a simple glance. I was stoking the embers when the door opened. I didn't need to turn to know who it was. His scent, a mix of pine, leather, and something wild and undefined, preceded his figure. I kept my eyes downcast as befitted a servant, though every fibre of my body screamed for me to face him. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice softer than I had ever heard in the halls. It was not a request that could be denied. Slowly I raised my face. He had removed his crown and armour, wearing only a simple linen shirt and leather breeches. Without the trappings of power, he seemed simultaneously more human and more dangerous. "What is your name?" he asked, studying me with those penetrating eyes. "Eleanor," I replied, surprised my voice didn't betray the tremor running through my body. "Eleanor," he repeated, as if testing the sound on his tongue. "Daughter of Marianne." My heart nearly stopped. How do you know my mother's name?" In response, he walked to the oak dresser and took out the miniature portrait I had seen days before. "Because she was important to me too," he said, caressing the painting with a care that spoke of lost intimacy. "More than you can imagine." The revelation hung between us like a raven with open wings. 1,000 questions formed in my mind, but before I could articulate any of them, screams echoed down the corridor. Lady Eleonora burst into the chambers, her face contorted into a mask of calculated fury. "Forgive me, Your Majesty," she said, barely concealing the contempt in her voice. "But we have discovered that our family's most valuable jewel has disappeared. The sapphire necklace that belonged to my grandmother." Her eyes fixed on me like daggers. "And it seems the culprit is right here, alone in your chambers." The king did not move. His face remained impassive, but I saw something blazing in the depths of those grey eyes. "Are you accusing a servant of theft in my presence, Lady Eleonora?" "I have proof, Your Majesty," she replied, producing a small velvet pouch from her robes. She opened it and let a sapphire earring, one I had never seen before, fall into her palm. "Found among her belongings. And this is just one of several items that have disappeared since she was promoted to hall servant." My father and Isolde appeared at the door, along with some guards. An audience carefully assembled for my condemnation. I tried to speak, to deny, but my voice seemed to have been stolen by shock. "Interesting," the king said, his voice now cold as the winter outside. "Especially considering I recognize this earring. It belonged to my mother, not your grandmother, and I myself gave it to Marianne 18 years ago." The silence that fell upon the room was like the moment before lightning strikes the ground. Lady Eleonora paled, her ploy crumbling before her eyes. "Even so," she tried to recover. "The girl should not be here, alone in your chambers. It is improper and— Enough, the king's voice thundered, making the very walls tremble. 17 years ago, I allowed an injustice to occur under my reign. I will not repeat that mistake. He turned to the guards. Arrest Lady Eleonora for false witness against the crown. As the astonished guards hesitated, unaccustomed to arresting nobles, Lady Eleonora recoiled, her face now a mask of dread. You can't do this. This house is mine. These servants are mine. This house, the king replied with terrifying calm, is on my lands, under my law. And as for Eleanor, he turned to me, his eyes softening almost imperceptibly. She was never yours to command. The next morning dawned in chaos. Servants whispered in corners. Royal horses were being prepared, and I remained locked in a small room adjacent to the king's chambers. Not as a prisoner, but as a protected person. No one dared to address me, not even to transmit orders. It was as if I had become a ghost visible only to one man. When the door finally opened, it wasn't the king, but Martha, the old cook. Her cloudy eyes shone with unshed tears. I always knew, she murmured, helping me into a simple woolen dress that seemed too new to belong to the maids. Eyes never lie. Blood always tells. What are you talking about, Martha? The old woman merely smiled, an enigmatic smile that carried ancient secrets. The wolf recognizes its pups, even after years apart. Before I could question her further, royal guards appeared at the door. Your presence is requested in the courtyard, young lady, said the elder of them, with a deference I had never experienced before. In the courtyard, a surreal scene unfolded. The king was already mounted on his immense black steed, his figure dominating the space like a final judgment. Lady Eleonora and Isolde were pale as corpses held under discreet but firm guard. My father, or the man I had always believed to be my father, seemed to have aged 10 years in a single night. Eleanor, the king called, his voice cutting through the cold morning air. You will come with me to the capital. It wasn't a request, but it didn't sound like an order either. It was a truth being spoken, a destiny being unveiled. I felt everyone's eyes on me, some in astonishment, others in envy, many in pure hatred. I looked at the manor house that had been my prison my entire life, at the faces that had taught me the meaning of contempt. Why? I finally managed to ask, my voice firmer than I expected. The king studied me for a long moment before answering, as if weighing each word. Because the blood of the wolf runs in your veins, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. Because you are my daughter. The world seemed to freeze around me. The words echoed in the silent courtyard, rewriting in an instant all the history I thought I knew about myself. Not the bastard daughter of a minor noble, but the daughter of the King of the North himself. Not a stain to be hidden, but a princess denied her birthright. Lady Eleonora let out a strangled sound of pure horror. Isolde collapsed in theatrical tears. And the man I had called father my entire life fell to his knees, trembling. Forgive me, your majesty, he stammered. We only did what we were ordered. To keep the child alive, but never to reveal— Silence, the king cut him off. Your obedience was to the wrong person. The conspiracy against the royal line will be judged in the capital's court. He extended his hand to me. Come, Elena, the north awaits its princess. I hesitated only for a moment. Not out of doubt, but to absorb the magnitude of the transformation occurring in my life. Then, under the astonished gaze of all who had despised me for years, I accepted his outstretched hand and was lifted onto the saddle, sitting before the king. As the gates opened and the horses advanced onto the snow-covered road, I felt the king's strong arm, my father's, encircling my waist to keep me steady. For 17 years, I believed you had died with your mother, he said, his voice now just a murmur next to my ear. A lie orchestrated to maintain peace between the realms. And now? I asked, as the manor house diminished in the distance, becoming just a shadow on the white horizon. Now, he replied, the wolf has finally found its lost pup, and the world will tremble with our combined howl. As we rode north for the first time in my life, I felt no cold. I won't lie and say the transition was easy. Overnight, I went from invisible servant to recognized princess, daughter of the feared and revered King of the North. The capital received us with a stunned silence, the news having arrived even before our horses. Crowds gathered in the narrow streets to catch a glimpse of the lost princess, the heir no one knew existed. Their gazes were not of admiration or joy, but of distrust and fear. The royal castle was a fortress of black stone and iron, as imposing and austere as its lord. Spire-like towers pierced the grey sky, and banners with the wolf emblem fluttered in the biting wind. Unlike the fairy tales I read in secret by candlelight, there was no gold or gleaming marble, only the dark, functional beauty of a civilization forged by relentless winter. In the first few days, I was little more than a prisoner in luxurious chambers. Maids came and went like shadows, always with downcast eyes, never answering my questions beyond what was strictly necessary. Dresses were brought, jewels offered, banquets served, all with a mechanical reverence that made my skin crawl. I could feel their fear. Not of me, but of what I represented. A change, a threat to the established order. My father, it was still strange to think of him that way, rarely appeared. When he did, it was always formal, almost distant, as if he didn't know how to navigate this new relationship. Our conversations were brief, superficial, though I could feel the weight of 1,000 unspoken words in each silence that stretched between us. It was during one of these rare visits that he finally told me the full story. My mother, Marianne, was not a simple lover, but a princess from the neighbouring kingdom sent to seal a peace agreement through marriage. They had fallen genuinely in love, something rare in political unions. But before the marriage could be performed, a faction within the court led by her own sister, the current Queen Regent of the neighbouring kingdom, orchestrated a plan to prevent the union. Marianne was slowly poisoned, he said, his face a mask of contained pain, so subtly that the healers mistook it for a natural illness. When I discovered the truth, it was already too late to save her. His voice faltered for the first time. She died in my arms. Days after giving birth, her last words were a plea for me to protect our daughter. But you didn't protect me, the words escaped bitterly before I could contain them. You abandoned me with them. His eyes, the same grey eyes I now saw in the mirror every day, met mine with an almost painful intensity. I was informed that you had died with her. A baby's body was presented, burned beyond recognition. I believed. His voice broke again. For 17 years, I believed I had lost everything. How did you know I was alive? A sad smile touched his lips. Blood calls to blood, Elena. When I saw your eyes in that hall, something awakened in me, a certainty I couldn't explain. And then, I found this. He drew the small portrait of my mother from inside his robes. I knew that only one person would have reason to guard this image so preciously. In the following weeks, I was officially presented to the court as Princess Eleanor of the North, legitimate daughter of King Alaric and heir to the throne. The ceremony was solemn and tense, with nobles forcing smiles while their eyes calculated how this turn of events would affect their own ambitions. I could feel their minds working, re-evaluating alliances, reconsidering loyalties. The most affected was, without a doubt, Duchess Freya, a distant cousin of the king and, until my appearance, considered the presumptive heir to the throne. Tall, elegant, with raven-wing black hair and a smile that never reached her eyes, she was the only one to approach me during the banquet that followed. "What a fascinating story, yours," she said, her melodious voice concealing the venom in her words. A servant transformed into a princess overnight. Sounds like a fairy tale, doesn't it? "I wasn't transformed into anything, Duchess," I replied, holding her gaze as I had learned to do in recent weeks. "I merely returned to the place that always belonged to me." Her smile widened, but her eyes remained cold as ice. Of course. Blood is everything, isn't it? Though sometimes I wonder." She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice to a whisper. how much wolf truly remains in you after so many years living as a sheep. Before I could answer, she swept away in a rustle of expensive silks, leaving behind the echoes of her veiled threat and a sweet scent that reminded me of dead flowers. That night, alone in my chambers, I heard again the distant howl that had accompanied me since the night of my expulsion from the manor house. This time, however, it didn't seem to come from outside, from the forests or mountains. It seemed to come from within the castle itself, from the depths of its ancient foundations. And, for the first time, I felt the urge to respond. I opened the window, letting the icy night air fill the room. The full moon hung immense in the sky, bathing the black walls in an almost supernatural blue light. And then, without fully understanding what I was doing, I let out a sound from my throat that I never imagined myself capable of producing. Half scream, half song, a call that tore through the night like a blade. The silence that followed lasted only an instant. Then, from the depths of the castle came the response, a powerful ancestral howl that made my blood vibrate with recognition. And then another, and another, dozens of them, a wild symphony that seemed to celebrate my return. The next morning, when my headmaid entered to help me with my dress, I noticed something different in her gaze. No longer fear or distrust, but something close to reverence. "The wolves sang for you last night, Your Highness," she said, her voice barely containing her admiration. "They recognized your voice." "Wolves?" I asked, confused. "In the castle?" A mysterious smile touched her lips. "They are not merely wolves, Your Highness. They are the guardians. They have served your family for generations. They say only true northern blood can summon them, or understand them." Before I could question further, she hastened to add, "Your presence is requested in the council chamber, Your Highness. The king has called an urgent meeting." The council chamber was a circular room of bare stone, illuminated by torches and a large skylight in the vaulted ceiling. A round table of black oak dominated the center, carved with ancient symbols I didn't yet understand. When I entered, everyone was already present, my father at the head, the councillors in their designated places, and Duchess Freya, who was not officially a member of the council, but whose presence seemed to be tolerated by birthright. "Ah, the princess finally grants us her presence," Freya commented, her sweet smile contrasting with the venom in her words. "Eleanor," my father ignored the comment, indicating the empty seat to his right, a position of honor that did not go unnoticed by those present. "We have urgent matters to discuss." I sat, feeling the weight of all eyes. One of the elder councillors, Lord Thorne, cleared his throat before speaking. "We have received news from the south. Queen Morgana requests an audience." The name fell upon the room like a stone in still waters. Morgana, my mother's sister, the woman who had orchestrated her murder, the usurper who now ruled the neighboring kingdom. My aunt. After 17 years of silence, she suddenly wishes to speak, Lord Thorne continued, his contempt barely contained. "She claims to bring a proposal for lasting peace between the realms." "Peace," my father repeated the word as if it were a curse. "The same peace she promised when she poisoned my wife and tried to kill my daughter." A tense silence fell upon the room. I realized then that not all the councillors knew the full truth of what had happened in the past. "Perhaps we should hear what she has to say," suggested another councillor, younger and obviously more cautious. "The Cold War between our realms has lasted almost 2 decades. The people suffer with blocked trade routes, divided alliances." "I agree," Freya's voice was honeyed. "Besides, it would be a perfect opportunity to introduce our newly discovered princess to the outside world. After all, everyone would love to meet the niece Morgana believed to be dead." Her eyes met mine, challenging. I then understood her game. She wanted to put me face to face with the woman who had ordered my death, hoping perhaps that the shock would break me. or that Morgana would finish the work she had started 17 years ago. To everyone's surprise, including my own, I heard my voice rise clear and firm. I will receive her. My father turned sharply, his grey eyes searching mine with intensity. You don't have to do this, Elena. I do, I replied, holding his gaze. Whether she comes for peace or for war, whether she brings truths or lies, I need to look into the eyes of the woman who killed my mother. I need her to see that she failed, that her sister's blood still runs in the veins of the North. An admiring silence swept through the table. Even Freya seemed momentarily disconcerted by my resolve. My father studied me for a long moment before nodding. Very well. We will receive Morgana in formal audience within a moon, but we will not be unprepared. He turned to the council. Double the patrols on the borders. Reinforce the palace guard. Examine every member of her retinue before they cross our gates. As the councillors discussed the security details, I felt something strange happening within me. A warmth that began in the center of my chest and spread slowly through my veins, reaching my fingertips. I looked at my hands and, for a fleeting moment, thought I saw my nails lengthen, sharp as claws. I blinked, and the vision dissipated. That night, I went to the Royal Library, a labyrinth of shelves that rose to the vaulted ceiling, containing knowledge accumulated over generations. I searched the oldest sections, guided by an instinct I didn't fully comprehend, until I found a tome bound in worn leather, its pages yellowed with time. The title, written in an ancient language I should not have been able to understand, shone with recognition in my eyes. The Wolf Lineage, Secret History of the Royal House of the North. As the pages revealed ancient secrets, the supernatural origin of my lineage, the pact between the first kings and the mountain wolves, the curse and blessing that ran in our blood, I finally understood what my father had meant by the blood of the wolf. It was not just a poetic expression or a heraldic symbol. It was our true nature. The full moon approached, and with it, Morgana's visit. I would not merely be the bastard princess facing her mother's killer. I would be the wolf caged for 17 years, finally free to bare its fangs. Queen Morgana arrived on a morning of dense fog, when the sun could barely penetrate the low clouds that embraced the castle towers. Her retinue, smaller than expected for a visiting monarch, entered through the main gates in a disturbing silence, broken only by the occasional whinny of horses and the metallic clinking of her personal guard's armor. I watched from the high window of my chambers, feeling a whirlwind of contradictory emotions. Hatred and curiosity, fear and a strange anticipation. The woman who had ordered my death, who had murdered my mother, was now under the same roof as me. The aunt I never knew, my own blood, transformed into an enemy even before my birth. The audience was scheduled for dusk, a strategic time chosen by my father. Twilight was sacred to our people, the moment when the veil between worlds grew thinner, when the blood of the wolf ran stronger in our veins. It would be when Morgana was at her greatest disadvantage. I dressed with care, not to impress her, but to assert my identity. A black velvet gown with silver accents, my hair loose around my face and around my neck. The crescent moon pendant I had found among my mother's belongings, a symbol of the Royal House of the North, which now belonged to me by right. The throne room was prepared to convey power and intimidation. Torches lit in sequence created a corridor of fire that led to the dais where two thrones stood. A larger one, carved from black stone with silver inlays, occupied by my father, and a slightly smaller one, of similar construction, that now awaited me. Behind us, an immense tapestry depicted the founding legend of our lineage. The first king of the North kneeling before the great white wolf, sealing the ancestral pact. The court nobles stood in ordered rows along the sides of the hall, all dressed in sober tones, many displaying the wolf emblem. Duchess Freya was among them, her blood-red gown a silent challenge to tradition, her calculating gaze following my every move as I walked down the central aisle to the throne. My father rose as I approached, a gesture of respect that surprised the court. Only when I was seated did he return to his place, his hand momentarily covering mine in a rare gesture of comfort. "Are you prepared?" he murmured, his voice low enough for only me to hear. "I was born for this moment," I replied, surprising myself with the certainty in my words. A fleeting smile touched his lips, and for the first time, I saw in him the pride a daughter longs to awaken in a father. Then his face returned to the impassive mask of the King of the North, and he gestured for the doors to be opened. Queen Morgana entered alone, leaving her guard behind, a bold move intended to demonstrate confidence but which I interpreted as arrogance. She was a woman of icy beauty with black hair flecked with silver strands and eyes of such a clear blue they seemed almost white. She wore a dark blue silk gown, almost purple, with golden embroidery representing stars, the colours and symbols of her realm, the South, land of the eternal sky. She advanced down the corridor of fire without showing fear, her gaze fixed on my father. Only when she reached the foot of the dais a few feet away did her eyes shift to me. The shock on her face was momentary, but undeniable. A quick spasm that contorted her perfect features before she could regain control. "Your Majesty," she addressed my father, her voice melodious and controlled, deliberately ignoring my presence. "I thank you for the opportunity of this audience. 17 years is too long for sister kingdoms to remain estranged." "Sister kingdoms," my father repeated, his voice glacial. "An interesting choice of words, considering what you did to your own sister." Morgana was not perturbed by the direct accusation. "The past is filled with tragedies and misunderstandings, Alaric. I have come to offer a different future." "What future could you offer that would erase Marianne's blood from your hands?" The question came from me, not my father, and the silence that followed was absolute. It was the first time I had spoken in a formal audience, and I had broken all rules of protocol. Morgana finally turned to me, her clear eyes studying me with disturbing intensity. "You resemble her," she said, ignoring my question. "Even the gestures. It's like seeing a ghost." "I am no ghost," I replied, keeping my voice firm despite the internal tremor her words provoked. "I am what remained after you tried to destroy everything my mother loved." A murmur went through the court. No one expected such a direct confrontation so early in the audience. My father did not interfere, allowing me to lead that clash. Morgana inclined her head slightly as if assessing me in a new light. "I see you grew up believing in stories of villains and heroes, child. Reality is rarely so simple." "Then clarify it," I challenged. "Tell everyone present here that you did not poison your own sister, that you did not conspire to usurp the throne that should have been hers, that you did not order the death of an innocent baby." A sad smile touched her lips. "You truly don't know, do you? No one told you the full truth." "The truth," my father interrupted, his voice now dangerously low, "is that you came here under the pretext of peace, only to sow more lies." Morgana stared at him for a long moment before replying. "I came to offer an alliance through matrimony, Alaric. My son, Prince Darian, needs a wife. And your daughter." She looked at me again, something indecipherably complex in her gaze. "Newly discovered, needs legitimacy in the eyes of the outside world." "How dare you?" My father's voice thundered through the hall. "My daughter is legitimate by birth and by blood. She does not need your son to validate her right." "The world is not the North, Alaric," Morgana replied, unperturbed. "Out there, the other realms will murmur, will question. A princess who appears out of nowhere after 17 years? Raised as a servant, without formal education, without knowledge of protocol or diplomacy. They will see her as what you yourself believed her to be, an opportunistic imposter." Her words hit me like accurate arrows, touching insecurities I barely admitted to myself. As much as I tried to carry myself as a princess, there were moments when the reflection of the servant still haunted me. An automatic gesture of submission, a startled jump at being called Your Highness, the strangeness of giving orders instead of receiving them. "My son was raised to rule," Morgana continued, now speaking directly to me. "He can teach you what you never had the opportunity to learn. And you?" Her eyes swept over my face in a deliberate study. "You can bring new blood to the southern lineage. The perfect union, the peace our peoples have longed for almost 2 decades. Suddenly, I understood the true purpose of that visit. It wasn't about peace or reconciliation. Morgana wanted to remove me from the north, place me under her direct control through her son, perhaps even complete what she had started 17 years ago, the elimination of her sister's lineage. You are right about one thing. Queen Morgana, I said, rising from the throne in a fluid movement that surprised even my father. I did not grow up as a princess. I don't know how to dance like a court lady, nor do I know the names of all the kingdoms beyond our borders. I descended the steps of the dais slowly, approaching her. But I learned other lessons. I learned to recognize poison in the sweetest smile. I learned to survive when everyone expected my death. I learned to wait for the right moment to bare my fangs. We were now face to face, so close I could smell her perfume, something sweet that couldn't completely mask an underlying odor of fear. Her eyes widened slightly when she noticed the change in mine, the grey transforming into amber, the pupils elongating into vertical slits. I will not be your son's bride, I said, my voice subtly shifting to a deeper, more ancient timbre. I am Elena Wolfsdaughter, daughter of Marianne and Alaric, heir to the throne of the North. And you, Aunt, should fear the full moon as much as you fear the truth. She recoiled a step, the first clear demonstration of fear. Around us, the court watched in stunned silence the confrontation between the young princess and the experienced foreign queen. The audience is concluded, my father declared, now also standing. Our answer is no. There will be no marriage, no alliance. You have until dawn to leave our lands, Morgana. After that, we will consider your presence an act of war. Morgana regained her composure with admirable speed, making a formal bow that did not completely hide the tremor in her hands. As you wish, Your Majesty, she said, her voice now devoid of its former confidence. She turned to me one last time, her eyes studying my face as if trying to memorize every detail. You are more like your mother than you imagine. Eleanor, I hope your destiny is different from hers. With those enigmatic words, she retreated, her dark blue gown gliding across the stone floor like a night shadow. The doors closed behind her, and only then did I realize I was trembling, not from fear, but from an ancient, deep fury that seemed to come not only from me, but from generations of ancestors whose blood ran in my veins. My father descended from the dais and approached, placing a hand on my shoulder. She wasn't talking about appearance, he said, his voice now gentle. Marianne also publicly defied her the first time they met after Morgana usurped her father's throne. I looked at him, surprised. My mother confronted her? A sad smile touched his lips. Your mother was sent on a diplomatic mission to negotiate peace. Instead, she denounced Morgana before the entire southern court. That's why they poisoned her, not just for being my betrothed, but for knowing too much. Knowing what? I asked, feeling that we were finally approaching a long-hidden truth. He looked around, noticing the courtiers who still remained in the hall, all trying to disguise their intense interest in our conversation. Not here, he murmured. Tonight, there's a place I need to show you. My father came for me when the moon was already high in the sky, a perfect silver disk that illuminated the castle towers with an almost supernatural clarity. He wore simple clothes of leather and wool, without any royal adornment, and carried a torch. Where are we going? I asked as I followed him through the empty corridors, our footsteps echoing on the ancient stone. To the heart of the castle, he replied enigmatically, to the place where we began. We descended staircases I didn't know deeper and deeper, until we reached levels of the castle that seemed to precede its current structure. Tunnels carved into the very rock of the mountain, with walls where ancient hieroglyphs told stories I couldn't fully decipher. Finally, we arrived at an immense circular chamber, its ceiling so high it was lost in the darkness above. In the center, a stone well from which emanated an ethereal blue light. Around it, life-sized wolf statues, carved with such precision that they seemed ready to come alive at any moment. The wolf sanctuary, my father explained, his voice taking on a reverent tone. The most sacred place in the north, where the first of our lineage made the pact that defines us. I approached the central well, feeling a strange warmth emanating from it. Despite the icy appearance of the blue light, in the depths, something moved. Not water, but something more viscous and shimmering, like living mercury. "What is this?" I asked, hypnotized by the slow, sinuous movement. "Wolf's blood," he replied, positioning himself beside me. "The blood of the great white wolf mixed with that of our ancestor. The source of our power and our curse." I looked at him, confused. "Curse?" "Every gift has its price, Elena. The power to transform, to share the wolf's strength and senses came with a cost. Every 3 generations, one of us must unite completely with the beast, abandon human form forever, become the guardian of the lineage." A shiver ran down my spine. "And when will the next time be?" His eyes met mine, an infinite sadness in them. "Now, in this generation." He paused, as if gathering courage. "It was meant to be me. But then you appeared, and the blood always chooses the strongest." I then understood what he was trying to tell me, and an icy horror spread through my chest. "Are you saying that I'm not sure," he interrupted me, his voice now urgent. "There are signs, your eyes changing, your instant connection with the wolves, the way the blood responds to your presence. But there is a way to know for sure." He approached the well, plunged his hand into the shimmering substance, and withdrew it, covered in a silvery liquid that seemed alive, moving over his skin as if it had a will of its own. "The wolf's blood recognizes its true heirs," he said. "If you are the chosen one, it will accept you as part of itself. If not," he hesitated, "it will reject you." "What does reject mean?" I asked, fearing the answer. "It means death," he replied simply. "That's why we usually perform the ritual only when we are sure. But we don't have that luxury now. Morgana knows more than she lets on. She didn't just come to propose an alliance, she came to confirm her suspicions." "What suspicions?" "That the prophecy is being fulfilled. That the daughter of the wolf and the star, you, born of my blood and your mother's celestial blood, will be the one to unite the realms not through matrimony, but through power and birthright." I looked at the silvery liquid in his hand, feeling an inexplicable call, an almost irresistible desire to touch it. "What if I am the chosen one? If the blood accepts me?" His face contorted into an expression of mixed pain and pride. "Then you will have to make a choice no one should ever have to make. Assume the complete transformation and become the guardian wolf, protecting the realm but abandoning your humanity. Or resist the call, keeping your human form but carrying the weight of knowing that another will have to take your place." The revelation hung between us like a sentence. Everything I thought I knew about my past and my future was being rewritten before my eyes. I was not just a princess reclaiming her rightful place. I was the possible chosen one of an ancestral curse, destined for a sacrifice I barely understood. "There is a third option," my father said, his voice now almost a whisper. "One that your mother discovered in ancient texts, and for which she was murdered before she could reveal it. A way to break the cycle, to free our lineage from the curse without abandoning the wolf's power." "What is it?" I asked, my heart quickening with sudden hope. "I don't know the details," he admitted, the frustration evident in his voice. "Morgana destroyed the texts after Marianne's death. All I know is that it involves a union of opposing powers, the wolf and the star, the north and the south, darkness and light. That's why she wants to marry me to her son." I suddenly understood. Not to control me, but because somehow that union could be the key to breaking the curse. Or to something more. My father nodded slowly. "Morgana has always feared the wolf's power. Her plan may be to use you to end our lineage once and for all, eliminating both the curse and the blessing." He extended his hand covered in the silvery liquid. "It's your choice, Elena, to find out if you are truly the chosen one, and if so, which path to follow. No one can decide that for you." I looked at the outstretched hand, at the ancestral blood that gleamed like living mercury, calling to me. My entire life had been shaped by choices others made for me, to be abandoned, to be raised as a servant, to be unjustly accused, to be rescued. This would be my first, truly my own decision, the first time I would face my destiny with open eyes. I extended my own hand, hesitated for a moment on the brink of an irreversible transformation, and then, with a decisive movement, I touched the silvery blood. The sensation was beyond any human description. It was not pain nor pleasure, but something more primordial, as if every cell in my body was awakened simultaneously, as if my very essence was illuminated from within. The silvery liquid did not remain on the surface of my skin, but was absorbed instantly, disappearing into my veins as if it had always belonged there. My father recoiled a step, his eyes wide with astonishment and reverence. "Eleanor," he whispered, his voice trembling slightly, "your eyes—" I didn't need a mirror to know what he saw. I could feel the change, sharpened vision, capable of discerning every detail in the deepest shadows of the chamber. A sense of smell that now picked up thousands of previously imperceptible nuances. Hearing so refined that it could detect the flapping of a bat's wings in distant caves. "The blood has accepted you," he said, a mix of admiration and sadness in his voice. "You are the chosen one." Before I could reply, a tremor ran through the chamber floor. The liquid in the well began to bubble violently, and the wolf statues around us seemed to vibrate with momentary life. A distant howl echoed through the tunnels, followed by another and another, dozens of them, forming an ancestral chorus that seemed to celebrate and lament simultaneously. "They know," my father murmured. "The guardians feel when the blood chooses." A sudden urgency took hold of me, a certainty that came not from my thoughts, but from somewhere deeper and more instinctive. "We need to go back," I said, my voice sounding strangely double as if two throats spoke in unison. "Now," my father did not question. We retraced our path through the dark tunnels, climbing the ancient staircases, faster and faster, guided no longer by the torch, which had been extinguished in the sudden gust that swept through the underground corridors, but by my new vision that transformed darkness into bluish gloom, revealing every contour, every shadow. When we emerged onto the inhabited levels of the castle, chaos had already set in. Guards ran through the corridors, frightened servants huddled in corners, and the sound of metal against metal, swords in combat, echoed from the main courtyard. "What's happening?" I asked, though a dark premonition already gave me the answer. "Betrayal," my father snarled, his own face beginning to show signs of transformation, his features more angular, his teeth slightly more prominent. Morgana never planned to leave peacefully. We ran to the nearest window from where we could see the courtyard below. Soldiers wearing the southern colours faced the royal guard, while more invaders descended on ropes from the outer walls. Somehow Morgana had managed to introduce a small army, disguised within her seemingly modest retinue. "Where is she?" I asked, frantically scanning the chaotic scene below. As if in answer to my question, the great hall doors burst open violently, and Morgana emerged, no longer wearing the elegant blue attire, but light silver armor with the star emblem on her chest. Beside her walked a tall, slender young man with her same clear eyes. Her son, Prince Darian presumably. And between them, dragged by two guards, Duchess Freya, her red dress now stained with darker blood. "The traitor," my father murmured, a contained fury trembling in his voice. "She let them in." We watched, paralyzed by momentary shock, as Morgana shouted orders to her men, pointing towards the North Tower, where we were. She lifted her gaze as if she could feel our presence, and for an instant, our eyes met across the distance. A slow, cruel smile spread across her face, and she shouted something to her son, who immediately began to run towards the tower, followed by a group of elite soldiers. "They came for you," my father said, stepping away from the window and drawing his sword. "Morgana wants to eliminate the threat once and for all." "Or capture me," I replied, a sudden clarity forming in my mind. "If what you said is true, about the union of opposing powers, perhaps she wants to force me to marry her son, but on her terms, not ours." My father nodded grimly. "Either way, we cannot let them reach her." He turned to me, his eyes now completely transformed, vertical pupils in golden irises. "You need to escape, Elena. Now." "I won't leave you," I protested. "I just found you. I can't lose you again." He held my shoulders, his intense gaze piercing mine. "You are the heir of the North, the chosen one of the blood. If we both fall tonight, everything will be lost. The lineage, the realm, the chance to break the curse. You must survive, not just for yourself, but for all of us. The sound of footsteps and voices approached rapidly down the corridor. We had no more time. Go to the Silver Mountains, he instructed quickly. Look for the elder named Thorn, not the counselor, but his twin brother. He knew your mother. He was with her when she discovered the secret. He will know what to do. How will I get there? I asked, the reality of the situation finally hitting me with full force. The gates are taken. I don't know the way. A wild smile lit up my father's face. You are the daughter of the wolf, Elena. There's more than one way to leave this castle. He quickly led me to an ancient tapestry on the wall, revealing a narrow, low door behind it. This tunnel leads to the caverns below the castle, and from them, to the forest. Once there, let the blood guide you. The guardians will find you. Before I could protest again, he pulled me into a fierce embrace, the first and possibly the last we would share. I am proud of the woman you have become, even without me, he murmured in my ear. Your mother would be too. He gently pushed me into the secret passage, and as the door began to close between us, I saw his body contort, expand, transform. The sound of tearing fabric and rearranging bones was followed by a roar that was not entirely human, nor entirely animal. The last image I had of my father was of an imposing creature, half man, half wolf, wielding a sword in one hand while the other displayed claws sharp as daggers. His eyes, the same grey eyes I had inherited, shone with a silent promise before the door closed completely, separating us. Months passed since my escape from the castle that fateful night. The journey through the Silver Mountains was arduous and solitary, but as my father predicted, the guardians found me. A pack of giant wolves, led by a silver-furred male with ancient battle scars crossing his muzzle. They escorted me through secret mountain passages, protecting me from dangers and guiding me to the refuge of the elder Thorn. Thorn was a man of deceptive appearance, small and frail at first glance, but with eyes that carried the wisdom of centuries. The royal counselor's twin brother had abandoned the court decades ago to dedicate himself to studying ancient texts and preserving the ancestral knowledge of the North. It was he who told me what happened after I left. My father, in his hybrid form, managed to hold back the invaders long enough for the castle guardians to organize. The battle was bloody, with significant losses on both sides. Morgana managed to escape with her son and some of her men, leaving behind Duchess Freya, who was executed for high treason. As for my father, Thorn hesitated before telling me that he had been gravely wounded in the confrontation. He survived, but the effort of maintaining the transformation for so long, combined with the injuries, left him in a state between life and death, unable to rule, but refusing to surrender to death until I returned. During these months, while the North recovered under the provisional administration of the Council, Thorn instructed me in the secrets of our lineage. I learned to control transformations, to communicate with the Guardians, to access the power of the wolf's blood without fully surrendering to it. And, more importantly, I discovered what my mother had found, the secret to breaking the cycle of the curse. It was not a union through forced marriage, as Morgana intended, but a much older and more complex ritual, requiring the voluntary union of opposing powers. The blood of the wolf and the blood of the star, shared in communion, under the blood moon that occurs only once every 100 years. And when will the next blood moon be? I asked Thorn, after we had deciphered the ancient texts he had managed to save before the destruction ordered by Morgana. The old sage smiled, a mysterious glint in his cloudy eyes. Tonight, he simply replied. That's why Morgana attacked when she did. That's why the blood chose you now. Everything converges to this moment. That same afternoon, as preparations for the ritual were finalized, a breathless messenger arrived at the mountain refuge. Morgana and her son were marching north with an army larger than the previous one. They had secured alliances with neighboring kingdoms through promises and threats. This time, they came not just to capture me, they came to eliminate the wolf lineage once and for all. She knows, Thorn murmured, his face pale with worry. Somehow, she found out about the ritual. We must hurry. As the sun began to set, we started the journey to the sacred place, a circle of ancient stones on the highest peak of the Silver. Mountains where the sky seemed so close one could touch the stars. The guardians surrounded us, vigilant and tense, sensing the approaching danger as much as we did. In the center of the stone circle, an ancient silver basin awaited, its interior engraved with symbols representing the union of opposing powers. The wolf and the star intertwined in an eternal embrace. The ritual is simple in its execution, but complex in its meaning, Thorn explained as we positioned the basin exactly in the center of the circle. When the blood moon reaches its apex, you must offer your blood to the basin, the wolf's blood that now runs in your veins. But that alone is not enough. What else is needed? I asked, watching the horizon where the first signs of twilight began to paint the sky. The blood of the star, he replied, his gaze now grave. Morgana's blood. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Morgana? But she is our enemy. How would we get her blood voluntarily? Thorn sighed heavily. Not Morgana. Her son, Darian. He also carries the blood of the star, though not as pure as hers. And... He hesitated, as if dreading the next words. And... There is reason to believe he may be more willing to cooperate than we imagine. Before I could question further, one of the wolf guardians let out an alert howl. On the distant horizon, torches moved up the mountain slope, hundreds of them, advancing rapidly towards us. Morgana's army had found us. There isn't enough time, I murmured, despair beginning to set in. They will arrive before the blood moon reaches its apex. Thorn placed a trembling hand on my shoulder. There's one last thing your mother discovered, he said, his voice almost a whisper. Something that even the ancient texts don't explicitly mention. Blood calls to blood, Elena. At the right time, those who are meant to be present will be. As darkness completely enveloped the mountains and the first stars began to dot the sky, I made my decision. I would not flee again. I would face my destiny, whatever it might be. If the ritual could be completed, I would complete it. If not, I would fight until my last breath for the land and the people I was only just beginning to know, but already loved as if I had always been a part of them. The Guardians formed a protective circle around us, their imposing figures silhouetted against the night sky. On the horizon, the moon began to rise, large, round, and with a reddish hue that gave it the appearance of a ruby jewel suspended among the stars. The blood moon. The hour had come. I reached for the small silver dagger Thorn had given me, its blade engraved with the same symbols as the basin. With a decisive movement, I cut my palm, letting the blood, now with a faintly silvery sheen, flow into the ancient basin. As the liquid touched the metal, a strange phenomenon began to occur. Instead of collecting at the bottom, the blood seemed to be absorbed by the engraved symbols themselves, which began to glow with a bluish light. The air around us seemed to thicken, to become charged with electricity, and the wolf guardians raised their muzzles in simultaneous howls that echoed through the mountains like an ancestral call. It was then that we heard, not with our ears, but with something deeper, more primitive, a second chorus of howls, answering the first, coming from the opposite direction of Morgana's army. Thorn and I turned simultaneously, astonished by what we saw. Descending the northern slope of the mountain, a solitary figure advanced towards us, a tall, slender young man with dark hair that glistened under the light of the blood moon. Even at a distance, I recognized the clear, almost white eyes I had seen only once before, in the castle courtyard. Prince Darian, son of Morgana, heir to the southern throne, came alone to meet us. The Wolf Guardians stirred, divided between protecting our circle and the threat, approaching from both sides. I raised a hand, instinctively feeling I could command them if necessary. "Wait," I ordered, my voice sounding strangely amplified in the magic-charged air. "Let him approach." Thorn cast me a worried look. "It could be a trap. Or it could be what your mother foresaw," I replied, keeping my eyes fixed on the approaching figure. Blood calls to blood. When Darian finally reached the edge of the stone circle, the wolves reluctantly moved aside, making way. He looked exhausted, as if he had run for days, but his eyes shone with fierce determination. There was no fear in his gaze as he faced the beasts that could tear him apart with a simple command from me. "Eleanor Wolfsdaughter," he said, his voice surprisingly melodious for someone so obviously spent. "Daughter of the Wolf, Princess of the North, I have come to answer the call." "What call would that be, Prince of the South?" I asked, maintaining my firm posture despite my internal confusion. "Your army marches against us even as we speak." "It's not my army," he replied, a flicker of pain crossing his face. "It's hers. It always has been." He took another step forward, and the light of the blood moon fully illuminated his face, revealing something I hadn't noticed before. His eyes, though clear like Morgana's, had the same almond shape as mine. Just as you are not merely the daughter of the wolf, I am not merely the son of the star. The revelation hit me like lightning, instantly reorganizing everything I thought I knew. You are also son of Marianne," he confirmed, a sad smile touching his lips. "Your brother, Eleanor, twins, separated at birth. One given to the north, the other kept in the south, the two halves of the prophecy raised in opposing worlds." I looked at Thorn, whose face showed not surprise but a deep understanding. "You knew," I accused. The old man nodded slowly. "I suspected. Your mother gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. When Morgana executed her plan, she not only poisoned her, but ensured the children were separated. The boy she kept, both as a hostage and as a fundamental piece for her own plans. The girl she ordered to be killed, but someone in the palace, we never discovered who, saved her and delivered her to Lord Henry with orders to keep her hidden." "Why would Morgana keep me alive?" Darian asked, his voice now bitter. "Why raise the son of her murdered sister as her own heir?" "Because she also knew the prophecy," Thorn replied. "She knew she would need both of you to break or corrupt the ritual. But she raised you without knowledge of your true heritage, hoping to mold you according to her own ambitions." "Until the blood began to speak louder," Darian completed, his gaze meeting mine. "The dreams began months ago. Visions of forests I never visited, of wolves that called me brother, of a girl with eyes like mine. When I saw you in that hall, facing Morgana without fear, I knew the dreams were true." A distant boom interrupted our conversation, the sound of battle. Morgana's army had met some kind of resistance on the mountain slope. Thorn hurried to the edge of the circle, trying to discern what was happening in the shadows below. "The castle guardians!" he exclaimed, his voice trembling with emotion. "Your father leads them." My heart leaped. "My father is alive? He's here?" "The King of the North would never abandon his daughter," Thorn replied, a smile illuminating his wrinkled face. "Especially not on the night of the blood moon." He turned quickly to both of us. "But this will only buy us time, not definitive victory. The ritual must be completed now, while the moon reaches its apex." Darian advanced without hesitation to the center of the circle, positioning himself opposite the basin where my blood already glowed with supernatural light. "What must I do?" he asked, addressing Thorn but keeping his eyes on mine. "The same as your sister," the elder replied, handing him a second dagger, identical to mine. "Offer your blood, the blood of the star that runs in your veins, to the ancestral basin. The symbols will do the rest." Without hesitation, Darian cut his palm and let his blood flow into the basin, a liquid of a faintly golden hue that contrasted with the silvery glow of mine. When the two met, they did not mix immediately. but formed an intricate pattern, as if dancing around each other, recognizing themselves as separate parts of a unique whole. The blood moon reached its apex directly above us, its ruby glow intensifying until it seemed as if the sky itself was bleeding. The symbols in the basin began to pulse, alternating between blue and gold faster and faster, until the colors merged into a pure white light that expanded into a vertical pillar. Connecting earth to sky, together, Thorn instructed, his voice almost lost in the roar of power emanating from the center of the circle. You must complete the ritual together. Instinctively, Darian and I extended our wounded hands to each other over the basin. When our bloods touched, brother and sister, wolf and star, north and south, a discharge of pure energy exploded around us. The pillar of light expanded, enveloping the entire circle of stones and beyond, creating a dome of power that repelled the darkness of the night. I felt a transformation begin within me. Not the physical transformation into a wolf I had already experienced, but something deeper, more fundamental. It was as if every cell in my body was being rewritten, as if the very curse that ran in my blood was being recalibrated. Beside me, Darian seemed to undergo something similar, his eyes shining with an inner light that reflected my own. Visions flooded my mind, fragments of the past, glimpses of the future. I saw our parents, young and in love, facing Morgana's betrayal together. I saw our birth, the separation, the divergent paths we had followed. And then, more clearly, I saw the future that could be, the realms united not by war or forced marriage, but by the truth of our shared blood. North and South finally in harmony, not through subjugation, but through mutual recognition. When the light finally began to diminish, when the power that enveloped us began to dissipate, a last vision emerged, so clear I could almost touch it. My mother, Marianne, beautiful and ethereal as in the small portrait I carried, smiled at us with eyes full of tears of joy and pride. Beside her, a majestic figure I recognized as the great white wolf of legends, the initiator of our lineage. Both nodded in approval and, slowly, dissolved into the air like mist at dawn. When it was all over, when the blood moon returned to its normal color and the stars resumed their serene glow in the sky, Darian and I remained in the center of the circle, our hands still joined, our bloods now completely mingled, neither silver nor gold, but a perfectly human rosy hue. "It is done," Thorn murmured, tears streaming freely down his wrinkled face. "The curse is broken. The cycle has ended." Sounds of battle still echoed on the slope below, but now we could see clearly. Morgana's forces were retreating, disorganized and confused. Something had changed in the balance of power, something they could feel even without fully understanding. "And Morgana?" I asked, still trying to process everything that had happened. As if in answer to my question, a cry of rage and despair cut through the night, a sound so laden with fury and impotence that it made my skin crawl. In the distance, a feminine figure stood out against the night sky. Standing on a cliff, her arms raised in a gesture of final defiance. "She knows she lost," Darian said, his voice now imbued with unexpected compassion. Despite everything she did, all her manipulations and crimes, she always believed she acted for the good of the realm. For the preservation of the star's power over the wolf's power. "What happens now?" I asked, turning to my newly found brother. "You are the legitimate heir of the South, just as I am of the North." A slow smile formed on his lips, so similar to mine. "Perhaps it is time we reimagine what it means to rule," he replied. "Not as separate realms, eternally in conflict, but as a united land, guided by both the wolf and the star." As the sun began to rise on the horizon, painting the mountains with hues of gold and rose, I saw my father ascending the trail towards us, no longer the debilitated man Thorn had described, but the King of the North in all his strength and majesty. Beside him, the castle guardians and the mountain wolves walked together, no longer separated by generations of estrangement. "The story does not end today," I said, feeling a deep certainty that came not only from my mind but from my renewed blood. "Today it truly begins." Years passed since that night on the mountain. The North and the South now prosper under the joint leadership of the crowned twins, the wolf and the star, as they call us in popular songs. Morgana lives out her final days in peaceful exile, her ambition finally tamed by the understanding that true strength was never in domination, but in the union of opposing powers. My father, King Alaric, abdicated the formal throne, but remains the most valuable counselor of the new era. His transformation, which once consumed him, is now a gift he fully controls, as do all descendants of the wolf lineage, freed from the curse of sacrifice, but retaining the ancestral power in their veins. As for me, Elena Wolfsdaughter, I am no longer the invisible servant nor the reluctant princess. I am simply who I was always destined to be, daughter of the wolf and the star, guardian of balance, heir to a legacy that is no longer a sentence, but a choice. And on full moon nights, when the howls of the wolves echo through the mountains and valleys of our unified land, I raise my voice to join them, no longer alone, never again lost, finally at peace with the blood that runs in my veins.